Hello, and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. My name is Matt Quinn, and this is In the Roud, a folk song podcast. I'll be your host to guide you through the world of traditional folk song as we go through the Roud Index, one song at a time. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. If you're new to the podcast, or new to folk songs in general, and are a bit unsure as to what the Roud Index is, then fret no more. If you go back to the very start of this podcast, you'll find an introduction episode where Steve Roud explains what the index is and why he created it. We're now ploughing our way through season 1, and this is episode 9. We're looking at the song labelled Roud 9, which is The Cruel Mother. Later on, we'll hear from singer Fay Hield and her version of the song, but for now, let's take an historical look at the song with singer and researcher Steve Gardham. Well, welcome back to In the Roud, Steve Gardham. Hello.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, great to have you back. How have you been since we last heard from you?
Well, I've had COVID since then.
Oh no! Oh dear, oh dear.
I wasn't poorly with it, but it lasted a couple of weeks.
You were testing positive though.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Yeah, it's had a bit gone around a bit as well. My friend of mine had it and had to cancel some gigs, and yes, it's not nice when that happens. Even if you're not suffering with it, it's not nice because it affects other people. Even if on a purely sort of diary level, it affects other people.
You can't go out and mix, yeah.
Yeah, and plans get altered and stuff. But well, let's get into it. This is episode 9 already. We're so close to the end of this season. We've got a long way to go in the Roud Index, but we've got one more to go after this. But we're in episode 9, so this is Roud 9, which is The Cruel Mother, and this is a pretty hairy ballad, isn't it?
Yep.
It is. So to bring everyone up to speed, what are we talking about here? What's the plot essentially of this one?
Well, basically, it's a warning. It was written as a warning, and I think that the earliest version that we have, the broadside, is probably very likely the original. Yes, so we've got this Duke's daughter who lives in York, and she's fallen in love with her father's clerk. So you've got this usual sort of unequal people from different classes falling in love. She becomes pregnant, and of course, being somebody in her position, she has to get rid of it. She goes into the woods, and she has the babies born. Two little babies born, and she stabs them with a penknife and digs a grave and buries them. And then she sets off, and she's going past her father's hole, presumably not immediately, but sometime later. And then that's an example of the leaping and lingering, because she's now at her father's hall, and she sees two little lads playing at ball. And she then wishes that they were hers and what she would do with them, dress them up in silk so fine. But they are the ghosts of her two murdered children, and they say, when we were alive, you didn't dress us up in, and you did all these horrible things to us. And then she says she repents everything and says, oh, what will be my doom? And she said, and the two little boys say, well, we're in heaven and you're going to hell. And that's the basis of the vast majority of versions. There are additions that have been put in from other ballads, but which I'll come to later.
Blimey, yeah, this is hefty stuff. This, and we're definitely in the darker side of folk ballads here, aren't we? This is really kind of intense.
And yet it is one of our most popular ballads.
Oh, well, as I was saying, as Vic Gammon and I were saying back on episode 6 a few weeks ago, humans in general do love the macabre. We do love the morbid. We love watching horror films, or a lot of people don't, but in general, there's a love for that. There's a love of sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories. We love a good scare. We love the morbid.
The
It's
Gothic stories,
we're
yes.
just so fascinated by the gothic horrors, the morbid stuff. It's even like on last week's episode, the two sisters. There's a kind of the morbid humor as well. We love laughing at the morbid stuff sometimes as well. And
Nearly all of these ballads that you're talking about have got burlesque versions where the people have thought, this is ridiculous and have sort of made it into a joke version.
yes, I'm currently, as time of recording, I'm currently halfway through reading Steve Roud's excellent book, Folk Song in England. And there's multiple mentions in there of burlesques and bawdy songs and comic songs from the 19th century, I think it is, and that are now recognizably ballads like the Two Sisters and Willie Taylor, and
Yeah,
all those songs
exactly. Yeah.
that are, as Brian speculated or thought, rather quite possibly originally were comic songs before they turned into the serious things we know now.
Well, funny you should mention that. I think that is definitely the case with some of the child ballads. I don't think they've ever got out of that. Lord Lovell,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Lady Alice, George Collins, I think they were actually written as burlesques. Not of
right,
another song, but just a general burlesque.
yeah. Well, for more information on this and other things, see Folk Song in England by Steve Roud, an invaluable book. Uh, Cruel Mother, then, you say this was really popular and widespread. How popular and widespread was this? Apart from really, expand on really.
Well, okay. I mean, all around the English-speaking world, but to go backwards to something else I intended to address. Um, the ballad is unlike many of the child ballads. It doesn't have equivalents on the continent or in Scandinavia. As you know, if you read Child's Notes, he finds variants of the story or even the ballad itself in Germany, in Denmark, etc., and gives all the details on that in the English and Scottish popular ballads. But well, he made a mistake with this one actually because he did actually say that there at one point that it is just an English ballad, but then he went and added a load of information so on what he's saying is an equivalent, but actually all the information he's giving is for the next child ballad, The Maid and the Palmer, which I'll go into more detail on later on anyway. But this brings us to the issue of um, where do these, how did this come about that we've got these versions on the continent in Scandinavia and we've got versions in England and Scotland? And if you go back and read through all the scholarship on this, which I've done like pretty much a lot of, quite a lot of scholars, academics, rather lazy studying really, state that it was a two-way thing between, that English ballads went over to Scandinavia and went over to Germany just as much as their ballads came over to here. But myself, and I've done a lot of research into this, looking at the Danish ballads and German ballads and the Breton ballads as well, Spanish ballads, and that is simply not the case. Uh, Everything that child included in the child ballads, every single ballad that has an equivalent on the continent, there is no evidence whatsoever that the ballad went from England into the continent or to Denmark or wherever. It was all a one-way traffic coming in Britain. But having said that, we could mention something like Edward, for instance, where Taylor Archer wrote a book all on Edward and said that he thought that the ballad had come from England into Denmark, but it's a very weak hypothesis, and I don't agree with it personally. But
Okay,
there is one exception, and guess which ballad that is?
do tell.
The Cruel Mother.
Hooray! There we go. And here we are.
Yeah, what actually happened is, and Child covers this quite well actually. He says Um, the ballad, you know that one of his great influences, Child's great influences, was Sven Grundtvig, the Danish scholar and ballad collector, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He he had a lot of influence on Professor Child, but before he even met Professor Child, he'd already taken a lot of the printed English and Scottish, well, no, Scottish ballads, although there must be some English in them because the book is called Englis, Engelsk og Scottish Folkvisor, English and Scottish ballads. And
Right.
he translated them into Danish in about 1842 to 1844 and published them. And one of those ballads was a sort of what's it called? A mixture of several child versions that are in child, but obviously got them from the original sources, Motherwell, the Scottish sources anyway. And he'd published a composite version. That was the word I was after, a composite version, and that version had got back since 1840 into oral tradition in Denmark. So there have been collected in Denmark versions of The Cruel Mother,
Ah.
translated by Sven Grundtvig.
So it's a translation of an English version rather than someone from England going over there and singing it and someone else
No, no,
learning it.
definitely from his translation, and we can tell that. Uh, in fact, Professor Child translates one of those oral versions in his introduction there, and you can tell that it's a translation because it has at least one verse in there which is from the Child 21, the Maid and the Palmer, and that only has been those were put together in Scotland probably by Peter Buck, and I'll come back to that later. Yeah, that's something general about the ballads in general.
Yep.
Coming back to the earliest version again, if that's okay.
Yeah. How far
Yeah.
back can we trace this? Where does it go
Well,
back to?
as I say, certainly there is no record of anything like this ballad before the broadside from about 1690, which was printed by well, I'll give you the full title. The Duke's Daughter's Cruelty, or the Wonderful Apparition of Two Infants Who She Murdered and Buried in a Forest for to Hide Her Shame.
Is this the title of the song?
Yep. Printed, well, the actual, yeah, the Duke's Daughter's Cruelty. Printed for J. Deacon, that's Jonah Deacon, at the Sign of the Angel in Giltspur Street, obviously in London. So the ballad was written in London, but it's set in York. And that you'll find that with a lot of ballads. If the ballad is about something negative, which is this one is, like a horror story or something scandalous, then what you'll tend to find is that the broadside writer, if he's living in Edinburgh, will set the ballad in Glasgow, or if the ballad writer lives in Glasgow, or the printer, he'll set the ballad in Edinburgh. And in this case, you've got the ballad being written in London, where most of the ballads were written, and you've got it set in York, which is a nice, convenient, distant place,
It's
but well
halfway
enough
house, isn't it?
known.
Halfway
Yeah,
house between
halfway out. Yeah.
London and Scotland. Yeah.
So that so what we have, I'll read you the first verse, just so that because I mean the actual verses, there are 25 verses altogether, and they're pretty much the same as what you would expect to be sung in a standard version nowadays, still today. Certainly the version I sing has all of the verses that I sing are in there somewhere. What you have is something that is very common in child ballads, particularly in ballads, and that is you've got a lot of repetition because you've got the chorus, but it's not the chorus that we normally what you get down the most common chorus for the Cruel Mother is. You've got the first line, and you've got all alone and aloney, and then you've got the second line, and you've got down by the greenwood sido. That's the sort of most common. But here in the original, what I call the original, it's that there was a duke's daughter lived in York, come bend and bear away the boughs of yew. So secretly she loved her father's clerk. Gentle hearts be true to me. And that is those are still the refrains all the way through the ballad. It doesn't change. It just as the modern versions don't change. So so you've got quite a different chorus, but the verses are pretty much the same. What you get when you get to what the mother does to the babies once they're born, she'll enter back against a tree from there onwards, right through what one, two, three, six verses telling what she did to the babies, sticking them with a penknife, burying them, and all that sort of stuff. Uh, when we come to the bit where she meets the two children and she says, the two ghosts, she says, "Oh, mother, mother, if these children was mine, I'd dress them in silk so fine." And then they repeat, "Oh, mother, mother, when we were there, you did not dress us in silks fine." And then we get the whole of the same six verses repeated exactly. You set your back against a tree, and there you endured great misery, which almost is word for word the first time it occurs. So
Yes.
six verses are repeated almost verbatim, and then what you've got is two verses about going to heaven and hell on the end, and then you've got three verses that don't seem to have survived in the traditional versions. I'll read those out. The lady's cheeks looked pale and wan. Alas, I, said she, what have I done? She tore her silken locks of hair and died away in sad despair. And then you've got this final verse, which doesn't occur in any traditional versions, but which is, for me, is the raison d'etre of the whole ballad. And that is, young ladies all of beauty bright, take warning by her last good night. Now, this is very common in 17th century and later even 17th century broadside ballads. They are written and issued as a warning. Don't do this. There are many, many examples in the Pepys collection, for instance, of ballads that either start with a verse like that, or have a title like that, or finish with a verse like that. So to me, that is why that ballad was written. It's warning these well-heeled girls to avoid liaisons with the servants, basically.
Right. Okay. Well, yes. There we go. A warning in song form.
Right, what we got? Oh, right, yeah, it's an interesting point as well. Yeah, I've been right through the whole of the Pepys collection. I've got the full five volumes there, and
You
that's
just what is the Peeps collection for those of you who don't know about it?
Samuel Pepys, the father of the Navy, British Navy in the 17th century. Very very grateful for the rest of us are to him. Actually made a large collection. Some of it he pinched from some other people's collections, but he actually put together a large collection of about 2,000 or more broadsides from the 17th century. Quite a few of them became traditional ballads eventually.
Right.
And that's what Samuel Pepys did. He's the same chap who first heard somebody sing the Barbara Allen, Mrs. Nip, in the theatre.
Ah, right.
Right, so
Okay.
it's that Samuel Pepys
Right.
in
Yeah.
1666 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to say about Samuel Pepys is I've been through the five volumes, and out of all the many, many ballads and different formats in there, there are only, how many are there? Three other ballads that use that format, which Professor Child tells us was the earliest form of the ballad. Certainly, a lot of Scandinavian ballads, which is where a lot of our ballads come from, are that form where you've just got a single line, a chorus line or refrain, then another single line, a couplet, in other words, and then another ending refrain. Uh,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
and I've all been right through the whole collection, and there are only three other ballads, and all of those actually became or are from or came into oral tradition. So you've got the others you'll recognise. The others are the riddles wisely expounded.
Oh, yeah.
Child
That's
number
right.
one, yeah. Child number two, the Elfin Knight.
Yeah.
It's in there, which you've already probably done. And the other one is not a child ballad. It's a song I used to know as Rogie, and the Scots call it "As I Gaed to the Wellatine," and there is a version of that in there as well. And those are the only four, that including Cruel Mother, the only four ballads out of the whole of the Pepys collection that have that format of line, refrain, line, refrain. card, which I find quite interesting. And
Wow, yeah.
um, yeah, and of course, quite a few of the child ballads have that format, but a lot of those weren't on 17th century broadsides. A lot of them were translated from the Danish.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Do you want me to move on to the hybridization now? Because that's quite important.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. If you look at all the versions in Child, first of all, in the English and Scottish popular ballads, um, right up to version there are it goes up to the letter L. What's that? About 12 versions, and the last four, which are some of them a bit fragmentary, are all Scottish.
I've just counted 8 L on my fingers. 12, yes.
12. All right. Okay. Well, the last four of those all have some extra bits and pieces added in, which Child has acknowledged, but unfortunately he hasn't seemed to have taken it into account as much as he perhaps should have. Anyway, what has happened here is these stanzas are penance stanzas. So once we get to the last stanza in the standard versions, the modern versions, where the mother asks, "What will happen to me?" and the kid said, "Well, we're off to heaven and you're off to hell," and that's pretty much the end of the ballad. In those versions, they have had some penances that she has to do added, like she'll be something in a wood and a clapper in a bell and be an egg
Yeah.
through hell for 7 years, which occurs in an extremely rare ballad, which is the next one in the child canon, which is Child 21, The Maid and the Palmer.
I was about to say,
Now,
I
the
recognize this from The Maid and the Palmer. Yeah.
right. Well, the question arises, how does four stanzas, or two or three stanzas in this case, creep from an extremely rare ballad from in fact, the only known version at one point was the version in Thomas Percy's folio manuscript, which dates back to about 1640, 1650. And he'd found this in there, this Maid and the Palmer. A lovely ballad. I sing it myself, it's um, and it's got these. It has these stanzas on the end. And what has happened? This is my opinion of what's happened. I've no absolute proof, only circumstantial proof. But Bishop Percy in the 1760s, before the 1760s, in fact, was receiving ballad versions from the Scots literati, Lord Hailes, various vicars and clergymen in Scotland were sending him versions of ballads that they had um, collected in inverted commas. Means they. I think Edward is the biggest example. I don't think there's many people around still believe that that's a genuine ballad as it stands. It's written in all very, very sort of medieval language, and it's obviously a rifacimento by Lord Hailes himself, probably. Um, Not that, versions of What Is That Blood on My Sword weren't actually already floating around then, which they probably were. But anyway, these ballads were coming to Bishop Percy. He was friends, corresponding with these people. Now, I don't think that was a one-way thing. I think he was sending them material as they were sending him material. They were all interested in the same thing. They were all ballad aficionados. So, and I think he was sending them odd bits and pieces out of the folio manuscript, which hadn't been published by then, wasn't published until almost Child's just before Child died. He did include a lot of stuff out of it, but it hadn't been published, so they couldn't. The people in Scotland couldn't have got it from a published version. So I'm saying that Bishop Percy sent them a version, a copy of this through the post, and it somehow got passed around amongst the Scottish literati. And then where does it turn up next? It turns up in the Glen Bucket ballads, which only came to light 30, 40 years ago. There is a version in there which looks as though it's quite fairly different wording from the original. So it's obviously been passed around rather a lot by then amongst the literati. And then we get Peter Buchan in particular, and a couple of others as well, who are taking this and tagging those verses, those end verses, those penance verses onto the cruel mother. Well, bits, it's okay, it's quite appropriate. It's what the cruel mother did, and she's having to do a penance. But it's come from this, the Maid and the Palmer. And so that's some intrigue. I think Peter Buchan is certainly. I mean, he's a very very suspect collector. Is Peter Buchan? There's very few people left in the academia who don't think that his ballads have all been made up by himself. But anyway, so you get this hybridized thing, and that's where those verses come from. Now, what has happened there? No English versions, and there are lots of English versions, as you know. No English versions have those um, extra verses on the end.
Right. Okay.
But the ballad has been published versions have been pushed into America quite early on because um, uh, Peter Buchan it's in Peter Buchan's book. There's a version in Motherwell, and these have got published over there in America, and it's become that particular version with those added verses has become traditional, gone into oral tradition in America. So quite a few versions in Bronson that are American versions have those added tagged on verses in them. And also you will find occasionally in Scotland, I think you might come across some in some of the traditional versions you've got in your recordings as well. And of course a lot of the current, I mean, people like Stanley Robertson and others from that travellers did start going to the child ballads and start taking stuff out of there. Lizzie Higgins and people like that, and even a mother. They took Gina Robertson. They were taking stuff from books and stuff as well, and using that. Not all of it, obviously, but here and there, bits and pieces. So you will find them in some Scottish versions as well, and American versions, but no English versions. Right, there's just one other thing that I want to mention, unless you've got some questions before that.
Not really. No, no. This is all fascinating, and I have nothing to
Right,
add
okay.
really.
Well, we were talking a bit earlier about burlesques, and
Oh
the Cruel
yes.
Mother is no exception to that. There's
So
you've got
how would we define a burlesque in this sense? What
uh, taking the mick,
right,
basically.
okay. Just sort of
Okay, a funny version.
oh, what's the word? Parody.
Yeah, but parody can mean serious things as well, where burlesque is just actually taking the piss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So in our case, it seems to be, but maybe not so much. Ireland, where the burlesque seems to mainly come, and it mainly comes across as a children's song as well, which is the one we generally refer to as "There was an old woman who lived in the wood, wheeler wheeler warrior." Da, 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 and then we get a policeman coming along and knocking on the door when she's killed the baby, and it really goes into really you are you the woman that stabbed this child wheel so it really takes the pee out of it.
Right. Okay.
But
Sure.
we still get quite certain phrases and certain words those lines never die. You can trace them right back to the original 1690s version. For instance, she had a penknife long and sharp. Exactly. She had a penknife long and sharp. I'm reading that from the 17th century version.
Right.
The
Yeah.
exact
Yeah.
words in this ballad that's gone through numerous hands and come up with a burlesque version. And
Well,
it's
that's
still,
quite a striking image, isn't it?
it
A
is, yeah.
penknife long and sharp. In that context, that's a very
The,
striking image.
And there are one or two others as well, yeah, that in the ballad, and very often the one as she was going by her father's hall, see three children playing at a ball, a nice rhyme in there. That line always seems to occur as well in all the versions. Yep. So that's about it, really.
So I want to pick your brains then. What about the whole down by the Greenwood side area? Where does that come in?
No, then let's have a look. It certainly comes in some quite early versions. Again, uh, she went into in the actual lines of the original. She went into the wild wilderness. Is a line from the third verse, and so I think that interpolates itself into down by the Greenwood side as being used as a chorus.
Yeah, because that's
Uh,
normally the fourth line of each verse, isn't it? That's the
yeah,
second of the
yeah.
two refrain lines.
Yeah, and the first refrain line, "All alone and aloneo," that's obvious, isn't it? She's all alone in the wood.
Yeah, although I'm about to learn a version for something about yet I haven't even announced for this podcast, but it will be something I'll announce in a week or so. Um, is a version from that Shirley Collins had, where the first refrain line is "Hey the Rose and the Lindsay O."
That's Scottish,
Is that
and
Scottish
it's
version?
it's a standard. I think it's a standard refrain line from various ballads, the Rose and the Lindio. So it would have just moved over from another ballad, Binorio Binorio, similar sort of thing.
The Rose and the Lily. That's another song, isn't it? That's that.
Yeah. No, the Lindio means something else. It's not lily.
Oh, it
It's
does. It does. You're right. Yes.
linden tree or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first verse of that Shirley Collins one, I don't know where. I haven't done some diving into that version yet, but a minister's daughter in the north, hey the Rose and the Lindsay O.
That's a Scottish
Yeah,
version.
she's fallen in love with her father's clerk down by the Greenwood Sideo.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's Scottish. And then we go. Um, oh no, that and then we have she's taken out her little penknife. So we don't have the long and sharp bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Laid them beneath a marble stone. Two bonny boys playing at ball. I'm just picking random phrases here.
Yeah.
Just to,
The marble stone is an interloper as well. Yeah. She dug a grave and
there's a marble stone in some versions of Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor, isn't there?
yeah, you get them. That's just a stat. It's like a commonplace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Place a marble stone at my head and feet.
Yes. Oh, there's that as well. Of course, died for love. It's all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what do we get? We oh cruel mother, when we were thine, we didn't see aught of your silk so fine. Oh bonny boys, come tell to me what sort of death I'll have to die. And we get the penances. Is
So Scottish.
penances?
Yeah.
Penances, is that the plural of penance?
Yeah. Penances. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like sheep and sheep, is it? It's penance. The plural of penance is penance. No, 7 years as a fish in the flood, 7 years as a bird in the wood. Oh, it doesn't rhyme,
That's
but
Peter Buchan. That's Peter
is,
Buchan wrote that.
is it? Oh, excellent. 7 years a tongue in the warning bell, and
Yeah,
7 years in the flames of hell.
that's from the Maid in the Palmer. Yeah,
Yeah, I recognise that from the because all I've heard of Made the Palmer is the Martin Carthy singing it with the band of Brass Monkey, and
yeah.
that they did, and then you get. And then this version of Cool Mother, welcome, welcome, fish in the flood, welcome, welcome, bird in the wood.
Peter Buchan, word for word.
Yeah, welcome, tongue to the warning bell, but God keep me from the flames of hell. That's very similar to
And
some of
that's in
that is very
Fay,
similar to the Maid in the Palmer.
and Fay's version has that in as well.
Anyway, so yeah, so a lot of that is Peter Buchan, you said, writing that, and Maid in the Palmer bits done up at the end with the penances.
Yeah. If
And
you look at Child, it's quite clear. If you look at the last four versions in Child, you can see Peter Buchan has all those four verses, and the other people who also included bits of them just had fragments of them. So it's obviously been Peter Buchan who's introduced them.
yeah,
And
and
it's
then
right up. It's his typical style as well.
right,
He
and the
did that
melody.
a lot.
Yeah, and the melody is really interesting as well because it's not quite. I don't know whether you're particularly musically minded in terms of how to melodies and things, but how does this one go? I've been learning it. It goes to a chord seven at one point, which is very interesting. A bit modal. Minister's daughter in the north, hey the rose and the Lindsay O. She's fallen in love with her father's clerk down by the Greenwood Sidey-O.
Yeah, it is. You can tell it's related to the tunes. The tune I sing. There was a lady lived in York, rightful I did lie G war. She was courted by her father's clerk down by the greenwood side. Oh, so there's
Yeah.
some similarity,
And
and
and and that version what you sang is melody wise very similar, quite similar to the version that John Bojan ended up singing with Bellowhead called Greenwood Side.
yeah,
That's very low down in the valley and down by the Greenwood Side
that's
is
the
the
same tune. Yeah,
yeah, it's got that in it. So yeah, it's all links together. Really,
yeah,
really
yeah.
fascinating.
Well, that version comes from Shropshire.
The one you sang.
The one I was singing. Yeah. Mm.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love the way the melodies take on the one I'm learning, falling in love with her father's clerk, down by the green. That on the word down, you get this chord seven.
Mm.
I think it's a fantastic kind of because the rest of it doesn't imply there's going to be a modal bit in it, and suddenly that happens, and you go, "Whoa, that's interesting."
Yeah, yeah. I love that.
Great.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, do you want to mention any recordings of traditional singers? We made a list before we started.
Well, I mean, I would recommend obviously anything that Cecilia Costello does.
Oh,
She's
from Birmingham.
yeah,
She's a
fantastic.
fantastic singer. That was all out on a Topic Records LP, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she also has one in the musical traditions.
Oh, that's right. Rod Stradling's Musical Traditions label
Yeah,
put out loads of recordings
yeah,
of her as
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
highly recommend. And in fact, certainly I haven't listened to that Musical Traditions CD of Cecilia Costello in a long time, but the LP, which I only digitized about a month ago, actually her singing The Cruel Mother starts with her saying that her dad sang it to her and told her not to do what this woman
That's
does.
right. I've
It's a
remembered that.
warning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that as
So,
well. Yeah,
we're coming back full circle to the
yeah,
a warning
yeah. A
song.
warning. Yeah, that's excellent.
She sat at her father's knee and he sang it to her and said, "Now don't you do what this woman did."
I'd forgotten about that. That is an absolutely excellent link up to what I said about the original.
Well, I thought about it as soon as you said it. I thought, oh, I'll save that till we get to the Cecilia
Yeah,
Costello.
certainly include something like that. That is aces. That you know the fact
Yeah.
that it was used as a warning by in the 17th century, and yeah, and
And her
also
dad.
by her dad. Yeah, who was Irish.
Right. So the version she sings then is an Irish version in
Yeah,
origin.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah. As is Thomas Moran, I suppose. He's the
yeah,
recording of him went on one of those folk songs of England LPs,
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
samplers. And then Scots, after that, all I've got to recommend is some Scots ones, and some of them are from the same family.
Yeah, they'll be derived from the same versions. Yeah,
Yeah, we got Lizzie Higgins.
no, Jeannie Robertson might be the original of those. I don't know.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Hmm. And it's quite possible that one of them somewhere along the line got it out of child anyway.
This is true.
Yeah,
Yeah, Lizzie Higgins, Jeannie Robertson, and Stanley Robertson
yeah, hmm.
all sing basically the same thing.
Yeah,
And there's um, a record label, Springtime Records, a good output of trad Scottish stuff, run
hmm.
by Pete Shepherd. If you're listening, hi Pete, I want you on the podcast at some point. It'd be great to have you, please. There's an album of recordings of Jock Duncan, and been meaning to listen to that one for a while, but so I know that exists, but I haven't heard it myself. And then as we were prepping for this, we found Lucy Stewart as well, Greenwood Sideo, Lucy Stewart, which had. Did it say what did it say that the opening verse was taken from a different song entirely?
Yeah, yeah.
Logan Bray's,
Yes, yeah.
which is something like Roud 5,384 or something.
All right.
So I'll never get that one. But yeah, so I'll put a link to all these in the episode notes. But the Lucy Stewart one starts with a
And don't forget the Manchester one,
what's the Manchester one? Do tell.
the one I read out to you uh from the Marrowbones.
Oh, that's in the book.
Whelan,
Yes.
somebody Whelan.
Oh yes, Vicky
Yeah, Whelan.
Vicky Whelan. That's right. I'll make sure I've got if I've got a clip of that. Might well play that in a few minutes. But yeah, so those some Lucy Stewart, Jog Duncan, Cecilia Costello, Thomas Moran, Lizzie Higgins, Stanley Robertson, Vicky Whelan. I'll put links to all those in the episode notes, and I will play some of them in a minute. Well, this has been truly fascinating, as ever from your good self. That, I believe, is your last contribution for this season. Next week, I've got someone else doing Roud 10, so that's this is your last contribution this season, but we'll definitely have you back next season and beyond.
Look forward to it.
Good, good. That's all I can say. So in the meantime, though, Steve Gardham, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And there we are. That's the historical side of The Cruel Mother. Huge thanks to Steve Gardham. We're now at the halfway point in the episode, so we'll just take a few minutes and listen to a few different versions of the song sung by traditional singers. So what you're going to hear now are snippets of Cecilia Costello, Lizzie Higgins, Jock Duncan and Stanley Robertson all singing The Cruel Mother, and Lucy Stewart singing Down by the Greenwood Sideo.
There was a lady that lived in York, all alone and alone, yo. She proved a child be her own father's clerk, down by a greenwood side, yo. As she was a-walking down her father's lawn, all alone and alone, yo, she thought 3 times that her back would be broke, down by a greenwood side, yo.
She's leant her back against a ache, all alone and alone, yo. She's pushed till her back's near break, down in the bonny greenwood side, yo. She's laid her head against a thorn, all alone and alone, yo. 2 bonniest babies ever were born, down in the bonny greenwood side, yo.
A maiden was courted some years and a day, high to the rose and the lindy, until her beau did her betray, down by the greenwood side, yo. She leaned her back against the wall, high to the rose and the lindy, and bore him bonny bairnies to wa, down by the greenwood side, yo.
She's leaned her back against an ache, all alone and alone, yo. She's pushed until her back it break, down by the bonny greenwood side, yo. She's leant her back against a thorn, all alone and alone, yo. 'Twa bonny bairnies has she born, down by the bonny greenwood side, yo.
Oh, it's Logan's woods, aye, and Logan's braes, where I help my bonny lassie on wi' her claes. First her was and then her sheen, she gav me the slap when I was dean. She laid her head against a thorn, and 'twa bonny bairnies she has born, and 'twa bonny bairnies she has born, down by the greenwood side, yo.
And you can find the links to all those tracks and the albums they're from in the episode notes. On to the second half then. I spoke with singer Fay Hield and we chatted about her history with folk music and her version of The Cruel Mother. Well, welcome to In the Roud, Fay Hield. Hello.
Hello, Matt. Lovely to be here.
Oh, great. Well, it's lovely to have you. I think it was just over a year ago. I think March of last year. I think you were one of the first people I spoke to in terms of me sort of sounding ideas about this podcast out to the world to see what people thought, and you were very encouraging. So
good. I'm amazed to see it come to fruition. It's such a massive venture. So yeah, it's exciting. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's seems to be going well so far. I've had a lot of good responses and some much higher download numbers than I ever expected this podcast. So I haven't said it yet to the listeners, but thank you all as well for being so interested in folk nerdiness, because that's what we live for. Let's get into this. First of all, tell us and the listeners a bit about yourself, your musical upbringing, and your history with folk music. How did you come to folk music? Was it part of your family, etc.?
In the blood. Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? So I am a revival baby, I guess. So my mum was a Morris dancer, part of Oakworth Ladies Morris, and my dad used to go down the folk club quite a lot in Keighley, Pipes Folk Club. And so I was sort of taken along to lots of those things, and all, like in lots of folk worlds, all the social things that we did were around those kinds of activities. So they were my sort of friends and family, really. And then, yeah, so I just was around singing. That's been my main musical education. I did a bit of music at school, but yeah, I'm just a folkie born and bred, really.
Great. Yeah, I have played at Pipes Folk Club 2 or 3 times. It's a fabulous folk club, isn't it?
Oh, really? They're cracking singers. Yeah, really amazing, strong harmony singers, and loads of really strong female singers. So that's where I got my confidence, and just, well, not confidence, but it never questioned. I never questioned whether I should just sing my lungs out, because I was just brought up in that big shouty chorus singing environment, and it was very healthy for me.
Fantastic, yeah. And then you did the folk music degree at Newcastle University, didn't you?
I did, yes. So I was kicking around after a bit of a sort of post-teenage lull, not quite sure what to do with my life. And Maggie Boyle, I used to be a nanny for her kids while she was off gigging and things. So I was very close with Maggie in Keighley. And she suggested I went and did that degree. And I was very scoffing at first, because, you don't need an education to do music, do you? You just do music, just get up and sing. And I couldn't really play anything, so it was probably a bit of, well, I can't actually do it. But I went anyway, and I bloody loved it. It was really, really good. I got so much out of it, thinking really differently about what the music is and why it is, and why I love it, and why different people get stuff out of it. So, and I've never left the academic part after that, really. It's been a huge bit of me. And organising as well with Maggie, I set up an agency and started on the sort of industry side. So I've always sung as a sort of social singer, and then around that time I started the Witches of Elsick as well, was my first band, which we started at Newcastle with my lovely flatmates. And yeah, so sort of ran events, festivals, things like that, community music type things. And nice. So those are basically my 3 main prongs. I sing, I organise, and I think.
Right. We need more organisers and more thinkers. And more singers, but they're a good balance of all 3. Yes, I did the Newcastle folk degree as well. I won't say how long after you, but I also can't I don't know the exact number anyway, so I wouldn't be able to say. But I did it from 2008 to 2012. I did the degree.
Okay, right, yeah. Well, I was the first year intake, so it was all very experimental. We were all kind of learning what is this thing we're doing together, which I quite enjoyed that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, does that make me? I think I might have been in the 10th group of graduates, maybe.
Right, we didn't cross over at all then. Yeah.
No, not at all. They were long gone by that point. Yeah, it was fantastic. I had a great time. Mostly, but that's for another another thing. Yeah, and the Witches of Elswick. Elsick. I keep saying Elswick because I'm a southerner, and that word looks like Elswick to me, but it's obviously not. I grew up here. I lived in Fenham for a couple of years, so I was quite
Just
close
over the
by.
hill, in the posh end. Elswick was the scratty end.
That's right. We did look at a house in Elswick for the first time we moved to Fenham, and yeah, moved to Fenham. So,
It suited us. We were good. We were fine.
yeah, that's fine. I can't actually remember anything about that house in Elswick. It was very brief. So, round 9, The Cruel Mother. Do you have a memory of when you first came across this song, or was this one in your sort of folk consciousness?
Yeah, this is definitely a folk consciousness one because everybody sings it. Everybody's got a version. Yeah, I've heard it countless times in countless different ways. So it was just always in me. But I do remember I've always had a very particular passion for it, and that's a negative distaste for it. I've always hated this song, really, really hated it. And I've never really understood why, but I just, yeah. So the reason I ended up singing it on the album was a very conscious decision to go, okay, so this is really widespread, really well known, sung by loads of people. They obviously get something in this. Why do I hate it so much? What is it about this? And can I make a version that I like? So it was very much a kind of personal challenge, and I came to it incredibly negatively. So I found it really fascinating, actually. And I don't know, there's just something, because it's grim, it's horrible, it's such a nasty, nasty story. And yet loads of the versions have this jaunty tune and sing along a chorus kind of vibe to it as well. So that never quite sat. I couldn't understand that. It didn't sit well with me. And then the actual content of it, obviously you've got these grim murders. But I realised as I was looking through it and what is it about it, my repertoire is full of grim murders. You know, the whole folk canon is full of grim murders, and I love a grim murder. So it wasn't actually the stabbing babies bit that I found upsetting, which you'd think that'd be the first thing.
Yeah,
Turns out I'm cool with stabbing babies. That's
right.
fine.
Well,
And what I hated about it was that the woman, because it's a very moralistic and judgy song, and people call it a warning song, and some kind of message to women not to end up in that situation and things. And I think it just made me so angry that the woman, the title of it, The Cruel Mother, it just seemed so inappropriate for this person's situation. And I realized it was all that. It's the social baggage around it, both at the time that the song was written and the fact that people were just singing it without any kind of acknowledgement of what it is. And I think that just really, really confused me.
yeah, it's I was always a bit puzzled by that, to a lesser extent than you, because I think you've thought about this a lot more than I have. But it was there in my mind a bit. And as I was saying with Steve Gardham earlier, there's one of the most famous, one of the most well-known source recording versions is from Cecilia Costello, and on the LP certainly that I've got of her, the Topic LP, I think is she, before she sings the song, as I said to Steve, she does say she remembers her dad singing this when she was at his knee, and he would say, "Now take this as a warning, daughter. You know, don't do what that woman did." So yeah, it's sort of it was still being sung out like that in the last century, as well as back when it was written. You know.
Yeah, and I just find it really, really harsh.
Yeah. So do you have any particular memories of other people singing it when you were sort of hearing it
I've got
over
no
time?
specific memories, actually, just whenever I heard it, finding it jarring. So, and obviously, if this was a song that I absolutely loved, it'd be brilliant reeling off versions of my favorite singers, but it seems a little bit inappropriate to say, yeah, these are all the time. These are all the singers I think have done it really badly. So, and that's not what I mean. It's not down to individual singers. I just find it quite strange that we sometimes unthinkingly perform stuff that has quite a profound thing. So like you were just saying there, a dad singing it to his kid and saying quite openly, this is a warning, don't do this. So sometimes it's that open, and sometimes you just don't acknowledge it. But art works in quite a subtle way. So just by perpetuating it, we're perpetuating this idea that this woman is in the wrong in the situation and is the problem. And yeah, made me just feel really uncomfortable that by performing some of this stuff, I'm perpetuating ideas and politics that I don't actually agree with.
Right, of course, yeah. And yeah, just I think yeah, you have to think about these songs. You can't just sing them sort of blindly. And most of it's fine, but there's going back to episode 4 of this season with Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. There's a distinct section of that song that is kind of racism, really, the idea of the brown girl, and you have to really sort of take care with the version you sing or how you approach that song. And
it's
I think, yeah,
mind-boggling and it's mind-bending. And when you love the music and have been brought up in it, you're quite blind to a lot of this stuff because it just feels so familiar and so comfortable. And I found it a really stark experience, just sitting down and actually really looking at my repertoire and how it fits with my politics and my ethics. And there's such huge differences. And I am a person that thinks a lot, and even, you know, still just the last couple of years, it's been tough. So yeah, I mean, this is also really, really heavy, and this is probably one of the first songs that I gave a real in-depth appraisal as to what am I saying with this song, not just what am I singing, but what am I trying to say to listeners now with this song. Yeah, and I do that a lot more now with my songs going forward. But yeah, this was the first one.
right, yeah. So the version you sing then, where did that start for you?
So because there's so many versions, loads and loads of versions, I just copied loads of sets of lyrics from wherever I could get them, and I put them in a massive spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet.
This is the modern equivalent of Martin Carthy putting all the bits of paper on his floor.
Yeah, exactly.
And mix and matching all the different verses. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, did that literally exactly that, kind of cutting and pasting them so that the sort of scenes were lined up between the different versions to see how different singers and songs approach the different sorts of topics in it. And so I was just trying to get an overview of, well, what is the song? What are the key things that versions have in common? How do different people focus on different bits of it? And then I literally just kind of copied and pasted words and bits of it that I liked. So the version I ended up with it's a total patchwork. So I can't really say, oh, I used this version. Or I might be able to say that. I don't know. This is where it kind of got into the artistic process rather than the rigorous academic process. And so, I couldn't say what the base of it is. But a lot of the words and the lines are very much just taken from the tradition. It's not like I've written a sort of contemporary singer-songwriter take on the Cruel Mother. It is the traditional words in the main. It's just I've taken a particular perspective or a particular series of perspectives from different songs that present it in a way that I'm comfortable with. So things like I think Steve mentioned this when she sees the ghosts of the babies and she says, "If you were mine, I'd dress you up," and they say, "You didn't dress me up fine." But actually, in lots of versions, she does wrap them very carefully. She prepares a very careful grave in a very specific location. She gives them all the care she possibly can in her situation. So instead of it being this kind of bitter, horrible, yeah, no, we hate you, it's like, yeah, you don't have to read it like that. So I kind of was imagining the situation of the woman of, yeah, having to do the very best for her children, which was the motivation for her decision to kill them in the first place. And then the impacts of if you find yourself in that situation and your best outcome for your children is to murder them, like what kind of a hell of a head state are you going to be in at that point? And so then it's not surprising that you're going to see the ghosts of these children you've murdered, this kind of mental health kind of issue going on. And the thought that the babies would then come back and torment her in that kind of mental health situation is kind of understandable because that's her greatest fears, I guess, as to what have you done here. But that was a thing too much for me. So in my version, the babies aren't horrible to her. They kind of forgive her, but that's the art bit, is that I had to give her that that she needs forgiveness there. Yeah, and then the other bit is the warning thing. at the end, because that does come up in quite a lot of songs, but then it doesn't come up in other versions. But the song as a whole is essentially a warning to young women not to end up in this situation. And my big thing with it is that shouldn't be the take-home message. The take-home message should be society has left her in a situation that her best option is to murder her babies. Isn't that awful? That for me is the take-home message, rather than women, you're at fault here. But having said that, I felt that she wanted to be a warning. So the warning at the end for me is her screaming out, going, look at this situation, look at the desperateness of this situation. Do take a warning from me, women. Be careful, because this is the world you live in, not be careful, don't you be at fault. So I kept the warnings in, and it gets quite grim, and she's trying to, ask the babies to save her from the flaming gates of hell, and it's quite dramatic.
Yes, that's
and then people sing it to this jaunty tune.
Yes, you're gonna be in hell, and you're gonna spend 7 years as a marble stone or something, and all these
but for me, she's
penances.
willing to do that because she's murdered her babies, and that's a horrible, horrible thing to do. So she accepts all that. She takes that happily, but she doesn't want to go to hell for it because it wasn't her fault.
Quite so. And I noticed that your version doesn't have the sort of the immediate setup at the beginning about who she is. In some versions, she's a minister's daughter and falls in love with her father's clerk, and then you get a little bit of that sort of social juxtaposition and all that stuff. Your version starts straight away with her leaning her back against the oak. Was that right?
Yeah, just having a baby, or babies. It always seems to be two. I don't know. I mean, maybe Steve knows this about why. Is it based on a particular woman who had twins? But it is every version. It doesn't matter how widespread it is. It's always two babies.
Yeah. But you don't have the setup in yours. It's just
no. So it does go in. I think it's kind of implied that she is in a situation that she can't do this. And that tends to be younger women, lower class women being mistreated, but not exclusively. Yeah.
And where did the melody that you used for it, where did that come from?
I wrote that. Yeah, just
from your brain.
Yeah. Just popped out in the car one day. Yeah, and I did put a chorus to it as well, because a lot of them have that chorus idea. So on the album recording with instruments, it's got a chorus line, but then when I was recording it a cappella for this, it didn't really fit and work as an a cappella line, because I'd never sung it a cappella before, because I've just arranged it on the album. So that was kind of an interesting revelation for me. So I've the recording you've got for this has not got the refrain, but yeah, that was there's nothing particularly significant about putting the refrain in, apart from the other versions have it often, so it's a nod back to the tradition as well.
Yeah, so is it a relatively standard refrain, that one of whatever they are, the Rose and the Lindsay or the Rose and the Lily? And
so mine is, and the streams they flow so clear, which isn't from anywhere particular, I don't think. And it could mean all sorts of different things. It could mean the rivers of blood from the children. It could mean crying. It could mean your own mental clarity around the situation. So yeah, it's a bit ambiguous.
We like ambiguity is good in folk music as well sometimes.
Yeah, and the music's quite ambiguous. So the tune that I wrote, I remember when Sam and Rob, so Sam Sweeney and Rob Harbour, who I play with a lot, when I first took the song to them, I was singing it and we were trying to work out, well, Rob pointed out that I sometimes was singing it in 3/4 and sometimes in 4/4. So on the album recording as well, it changes time signature halfway through, which I don't know, the keen-eared among you might have heard, but lots of people don't notice that. But I think the recorded version, it gives a really interesting sort of journey through the song in that change of pace, really. So yeah, but that's ambiguity of this music, like you say, once you the tunes, the melodies, the timing, the words, everything's up to play for. The meanings, you can put your own twist on it and shape it however you want to, and that's the absolute beauty of this music.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a completely malleable thing. And so that's on your album Rackline, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Rackline. And Who is it? So it's Sam and Rob. But are the rest of the is the Hurricane Party still a thing? Are the rest of the Hurricane a version of the Hurricane Party on it, or is this just a separate?
It's always been quite complicated how to name or understand what your band slash group of musicians is. So the Hurricane Party has always been quite fluid in terms of its members. Ben Nichols plays on this album with Sam and Rob and me, and so yeah, he's played sometimes with the Hurricane Party. But yes, I've not been using that as a band name for a while.
Yeah. Right. Anything else you want to? Any other talking points with this, or have we sort of exhausted all avenues?
I think that's okay. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
That's
fine.
plenty.
Are there any? I know you said you don't want to recommend versions of a song you hate, but are there any sort of ones people should listen out for on the non-traditional side of things, more modern singers? I mean, I'm still counting like 70s Steel Eye Span as modern, second half of last century onwards.
I'm not kind of a song connoisseur or an albums connoisseur, so I don't have. I know you love your films and you've got that sort of memory of who sang what, where, and when, and that kind of encyclopedic knowledge and stuff. I don't really have that. I'm more hear stuff in the sessions or that this, that, and the other. But I do remember Bryony Griffiths singing a great version of Lady of York. She's great at digging up different versions and tunes and stuff that other people haven't heard. But that's take a listen to Bry.
Right, and she's your ex Witches of Elsick colleague, isn't she? One of
the coven.
That's right. Yes, but I'll throw some names out there as well. My ex Dovetail Trio colleague, Rosie Hood, did The Cruel Mother on her album The Beautiful and the Actual, which I'd highly recommend. I think that's just her unaccompanied, but when she does it live, her band do lots of sort of ethereal, stringy drones and things, which is really nice. I say nice, it's a horrible song, but nice in the accepted folk music use of the word. Pete Coe, excellent singer and multi-instrumentalist and all-round legend. Pete Coe did The Cruel Mother on an album called Backbone a few years ago, which is another one of those slightly jollier melodies on the 5-string banjo. But that's really nice. And I'm not as well familiar with any of any more modern singers from Scotland singing this, but I know that Shirley Collins back in the 60s and 70s sang a Scottish version, which I think is the same version that the traditional singer Jock Duncan used to sing from Scotland. So that's got a bit of a modal tune to it as well, which I really like. I was almost going to learn it the other day and then I stopped. A minister's daughter in the north, hey the rose and the linsey, oh, she's fallen in love with her father's clerk down by the greenwood side, oh. It suddenly goes to a sort of chord 7 if you're musically minded. I thought it was really interesting. But Shirley did that on a couple of albums. There's an American one, Greenwood Sidey-O or Greenwood Sidey is another. That's partly the Scottish one that then went to America, I think. The duo Anna and Elizabeth, who have toured over here quite a few times, did Greenwood Sidey, which is really great. And folk big band Bellowhead, of whom you are tangentially linked, on their album Revival did Greenwood Side, which I think is in context of the song being horrible, I think it's a really fantastic version. I think it's really interesting arrangement and quite moody and brooding. So I was very impressed with that. I'll put links to all those and Bryony's one in the episode notes. Otherwise, I think we've exhausted what we can say about this in today's sitting. I always forget to ask people this. This episode's we're recording this in almost mid-June, but this episode won't go out till early July. So in context of today is early July, have you got any gigs or projects coming up over the next couple of months?
I am at a couple of festivals this summer, so I'll be down at Folk East and Shrewsbury and Bromyard doing gigs and workshops. Yeah, I'm just generally busy.
Right, I am not at any of those, so I won't,
I
won't
won't
see
see
you.
you there.
I won't see you there. I don't look forward to not seeing you. I'm trying to work that into a thing.
Yeah, careful now.
Yeah. How does that work anyway? But yes, I'm sure. Yes, look up the relevant websites for those festivals. I'm sure that's going to be great. Otherwise,
Oh, I'm Whitby. I'm at Whitby as well, should have said.
how are you? Oh, that's great. I'm always at Whitby. When did you last do Whitby? That was
I haven't gigged there for a while. I went up last year for fun, like as a punter, and had a really great time. And
Yeah.
so it inspired me to get back there this year as well.
Great. Yes, I'll be there. My dad and I will be emceeing the traditional nights, the gigs at the Flowergate Hall every night. So who knows? They may throw you in there.
Brilliant.
But we'll see you around anyway. Otherwise, from In the Roud, thank you very much, Fay.
You're very welcome. Fascinating. Brilliant. Good luck with it all.
She leaned her back against an oak. First it bent and then it broke. She leaned her back against a thorn, and there she has 2 bonny babes born. Smile not, my bonny babes. Smile not so sweet, you'll smile me to my grave. She took a knife, both long and sharp, and pressed it to the tender hearts. She pulled a gown up o'er her head. She wrapped them fine as they lay dead. She dug a grave beyond the sun, and buried them deep 'neath marble stone, for the lords to walk upon. She walked the woods on a moonlit night. She saw 2 babes all dressed in white. She walked the walls both wan and pale. What ailed Our Lady, there's no man could tell. Oh, bonny babes, if you were mine, I'd dress you up in silk so fine. I'd lay you soft in beds of down, and watch you noon, falling dusk and dawn. Oh, bonny babes, come tell me true, what death I'll die for the sake of you. Oh, mother dear, don't torment thee, thy sin is lesser than the loss of we. It's welcome to be well in the wood. It's welcome, fish all in the flood. I long to be the tongue of a warning bell, but heaven keep me from the gates of hell. Oh, bonny babe, save me from the flames of hell.
That was Fay Hield singing The Cruel Mother. That brings us to the end of this episode. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the song? Are you a lover or a hater? Or somewhere in the middle? I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to drop me an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk or visit the podcast on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Just search for In the Roud, a folk song podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review or a comment on wherever you get your podcasts from. That really helps us to reach a wider audience. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Steve Gardham and Fay Hield. Join me next week for the final episode of this season. We'll be looking at Roud 10, which is the song Lord Randall. My historical guest will be Martin Nail, and my singer guest will be Holly Clark. That's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.